I found out my parents were ashamed of me in the worst way imaginable, publicly, and with intention. At my younger brother's engagement party, they didn't just exclude me, they placed me and my family next to the gift table like we were hired help. My son thought we were early to clean up. My wife gripped my hand, trying to steady me. And when I asked why, my father leaned in and whispered, "Because the important guests are in the banquet hall, and you'd embarrass us." What I did next shocked the entire room, and changed the fate of two companies forever. My name is Miles Harrington, I'm 34, and I run a logistics tech firm called Zenith Frame out of Seattle. We specialize in AI-driven supply chain solutions. We're on track to close a round of funding that could triple our valuation, and I just finalized talks with Hamilton and Rourke, a major Midwest distributor, ironically, owned by my future sister-in-law's family. At home, I've got my wife Sabrina, a brilliant trauma surgeon with a dry wit, and our 6-year-old boy Noah, who's currently obsessed with building circuits and eating spaghetti with chopsticks. We're a tight little trio, stable, loving, and fiercely protective of each other. But that wasn't always my life. I used to have a larger family. A father who was once my hero, a mother who knew how to cut someone down with a smile, and a younger brother, Evan, who had charm in buckets but never really grew a spine. 3 months ago, at Evan's engagement party, everything broke. Let me take you back to how it began. About 4 months ago, I was watching the Seahawks choke another lead on my home projector when my phone lit up. It was Evan. After a long pause, I almost didn't pick up, I answered. "Miles," he said, way too enthusiastic. "I wanted you and Sabrina and Noah to come to the engagement party next month. We're throwing it at the Silver Ridge Winery out in Spokane." I said I'd check our schedule, but something already felt off. The last family event we'd attended ended with my mother introducing Sabrina as the pediatrician or something, and Evan drunkenly suggesting I pivot into crypto to finally make real money. That night, after putting Noah to bed, I told Sabrina about the call. She didn't flinch, just handed me a glass of Malbec, leaned against the kitchen counter, and said, "If you don't go, they win. And if you do go, just don't let them make you small." She was right. I nodded, unsure if I was making peace or bracing for war. On the day of the party, I wore a dark navy Zegna suit. Sabrina stunned in emerald green. Noah picked a blazer and clip-on tie all by himself. "Dad," he asked solemnly in the car, "are Grandma and Grandpa nice?" I didn't know how to answer that. When we got to Silver Ridge, the party was already buzzing. People were sipping wine under string lights, a jazz trio played by the fountain, and laughter echoed across the vineyard. As we walked in, I felt the stares. Some whispered. I even caught one woman saying, "Isn't that the one who barely talks to the family anymore?" We spotted my parents near the tasting bar. My father, Leon Harrington, looked tired but stern. My mother, Margot, still wore judgment like a designer coat. No hugs. No real eye contact. Margot nodded at Sabrina, complimented Noah's neat little outfit, and went back to sipping from her stemless glass. Then Evan appeared in a tailored blue tux, all smiles. He hugged me like nothing had ever happened and introduced me to Charles Rourke, Amelia's father, owner of Hamilton and Rourke. Charles looked me up and down like I was a waiter that had interrupted him. "So this is the brother we've heard so much about," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to chuckle. "Didn't think he'd show. Guess you can't predict the help these days." That was when the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees, for me, anyway. What he didn't know was that my company had been negotiating a $6.5 million systems contract with Hamilton and Rourke for the last 6 months. They didn't know I was Evan's brother. They just knew me as Miles Harrington, CEO of Zenith Frame. And I was planning to sign the deal the following week. But I said nothing. I just nodded, kept my expression calm, and said, "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Rourke. I've heard a lot about your company." He smirked, dismissed me, and turned back to schmoozing. We headed to the reception desk to check in. The girl at the laptop squinted at the list, then frowned. "Sorry, I don't see you on the main guest list," she said. I felt a sharp chill in my chest. I'm the groom's brother, I said. Oh, she said, suddenly nervous. Yes, here. But you're on the supplementary list. She led us to a corner near the gift table, 3 folding chairs, no name cards, no centerpiece. Like we were afterthoughts. Like we were hired help. Noah looked up at me. Why are we sitting way over here, Dad? I smiled tightly. Maybe it's just temporary. But I knew it wasn't. I marched back toward the front desk, heart pounding. That's when I saw them, my parents and Charles, already approaching me like I was the problem. Leon didn't even let me speak. Don't cause a scene, Miles, he snapped. You know why we put you there. Just stay in your place. I stared at him. What place is that, exactly? Margot answered. You'll embarrass us in front of important guests. Just pretend you're not here. Charles, still smirking, added, These are real professionals here, Miles. Not startup boys playing CO. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just favoritism. This was a setup. They wanted me humiliated. So I pulled out my phone, dialed Laura Preston, my COO. When she picked up, I spoke with ice in my voice. Cancel the Rourke contract. Effective immediately. I won't do business with people who seat my wife and son next to a pile of crockpots. And then I stood, adjusted my tie, took my family by the hand, and walked into the center of the party. Every eye in the room turned to us as we stepped into the heart of the celebration, like we just walked onto the wrong movie set. The laughter died down. Conversations paused mid-sentence. You could feel the shift in energy, like a champagne glass cracking from the pressure. Evan spotted us first. His smile faltered. Miles? He said, walking toward us with that same salesman charm he perfected since grade school. You weren't supposed to. I thought your table was next to the crockpot shrine? Yeah, I said, my tone calm. We've relocated. Charles Rourke was already on his way over, flanked by my parents like some 3-headed beast of pretense. His voice was tight. Mr. Harrington, this is not appropriate. You're not on the seating chart for this section. Neither is basic decency, but here we are, I replied. Sabrina slid her arm around Noah protectively. He clutched my hand tighter. I didn't want him to witness a fight, but I wanted him to see what it looked like when his father stood his ground. Go back to your table. My father growled under his breath. You've made your point. I leaned in slightly. Not quite yet. More guests were gathering now, sensing drama the way sharks sense blood in water. And then, like a gift from the heavens, someone said my name from the crowd. Wait, is that Miles Harrington from Zenith Frame? It was Ari Patel, VP of Logistics at Kelvin Industries, a competitor of Rourke's. He stepped forward, clearly intrigued. We met at that tech conference in Chicago last spring. You're the guy doing those blockchain-integrated fulfillment networks, right? Charles Rourke froze. Oh yeah, I said with a small smile. That's me. Ari nodded. I've been meaning to reach out. We've been watching Zenith Frame closely. Didn't know you were connected to the Rourkes. I'm not, I said plainly. Not anymore. Charles was visibly sweating now. Let's not turn this into something it's not, he said, trying to laugh. There's been a misunderstanding. I turned to him fully. No misunderstanding. I just terminated the contract between Zenith Frame and Hamilton and Rourke about 10 minutes ago. Gasps. Audible ones. My mother covered her mouth. My father went pale. Evan looked like someone had just unplugged him. Even Amelia, the bride-to-be, was standing nearby, visibly rattled. What? Charles said. You can't be serious. Oh, but I am, I said. You treated me like I was invisible. Worse, you made my wife and child feel like uninvited extras at a party for my own brother. And you insulted my company to my face without even realizing who I was. More murmurs spread across the room. People started whispering in corners, glancing at Charles like they were suddenly questioning whether being seen with him was still socially safe. Mr. Rourke, I continued, You'll receive the official cancellation paperwork in the morning. I'd recommend you find another vendor who'll tolerate being treated like the valet. Evan stepped forward, his voice cracking. Miles, come on, man. Don't do this here. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw what he'd become, not just complicit, but cowardly. Did you know where we were seated? I asked, loud enough for the crowd to hear. He hesitated. I told them to find you a private table. Private? I said, smiling grimly. Next to the gift table? In the back corner? Alone? Evan's fiancée, Amelia, stepped toward the event coordinator. Is that true? She asked. The planner blanched. I was told to seat them there by your father. And Mr. Rourke? The whole room went dead quiet. Amelia turned to Charles, eyes wide. Dad? You said it was a logistical error. Charles had no answer. He just looked around for an exit that didn't exist. I'm sorry, Amelia said quickly, turning to me. Miles, I didn't know. I swear. I believed her. For some reason, that made it worse. Evan looked like he wanted to disappear. My mother finally spoke, her voice brittle. You're overreacting. You've always been dramatic. I turned to her slowly. No, Mom. I've always just had boundaries. You're only noticing now because I finally enforced them. And with that, I turned to Sabrina and Noah. Let's go. As we walked out of the room, back straight, eyes forward, I heard someone whisper. He's not the one who should be embarrassed. They are. I didn't look back. The drive home was silent at first. Then Noah piped up from the back seat. Dad? Yeah, buddy? Were we bad? That did it. My throat tightened. Sabrina squeezed my hand. No, kiddo, I said. We weren't bad. We just finally told the truth. And sometimes, that makes people uncomfortable. 2 days after the engagement party meltdown, I was up early in my home office, the morning light barely cutting through the blinds. My phone lit up with a call from Eleanor Kessler, Hamilton and Rourke's chief operating officer, the woman I'd worked with for 6 months straight, who had no idea her company almost partnered with her future boss's son-in-law. She didn't waste time. Miles, she said, voice tight and urgent. I've had 4 voicemails from Charles since 5 a.m. What happened? I gave her the short version. Your chairman humiliated me and my family in public. Deliberately. He didn't know who I was, he just knew I wasn't worth a chair near the champagne. She was silent for a few beats. I had no idea he was Amelia's father. He never said anything. I figured, I said. You've always been professional. But the deal's off. Eleanor sighed, less out of frustration, more like resignation. I understand. He's a dinosaur with a title and a complex. But Miles, this hurts. That contract was a game changer for both of us. I leaned back in my chair. Not as much as letting my son grow up thinking it's okay to stay quiet when someone disrespects you. She didn't argue. She just said, if things change, my door's open. But for what it's worth, I'd have left too. Click. I stared at the wall after that. Not the usual post-victory adrenaline. No pride. Just a heavy ache that settled in my chest like smoke after a fire. The kind of sadness that doesn't hit you all at once, it just drips. Later that afternoon, a message popped up on my phone. Evan, can we talk? I didn't answer. Not right away. But Sabrina, ever my compass, placed a hand on my shoulder and said, maybe it's time to let him explain. Not for him, for you. So I agreed to meet him. Neutral ground. A tiny cafe downtown that served burnt espresso and conversations that never ended well. Evan looked terrible. Pale, hair unstyled, bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept since the party. He stood when I walked in like we were strangers on a blind date. Thanks for coming, he said. I nodded and Saturday. You said you wanted to talk. He fiddled with the coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. I messed up. You think? I knew they weren't seating you in the main area, he said, voice low. But I didn't know it was next to the gift table. I thought it was just slightly apart. Private. I raised an eyebrow. So you didn't walk past the crock-pots on your way to give your toast? He winced. I did. I didn't know what to do. You could have stopped it. He looked down. I know. Silence sat between us. Thick. Cold. Finally I said, Why didn't you speak up? I was afraid, he admitted. Of disappointing them. Of ruining the night. I didn't want the spotlight to shift. I guess I thought it would blow over. And now? I asked. Now I realize I've been doing that my whole life. Letting Mom and Dad treat you like a footnote because it was easier than confronting them. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a new envelope. This is the real invitation. For the wedding. I didn't touch it. No, Charles, he added quickly. No big production. We're scaling it down. Just the people who matter. Amelia's on board. Actually, it was her idea. I finally met his eyes. They weren't performative like they'd always been. There was guilt there. But also clarity. Regret. You think it fixes things? I asked quietly. He shook his head. No. But I hope it starts to. I didn't give him an answer. Not right then. But I took the envelope. Back in the car, I sat behind the wheel for 15 minutes, just breathing. Remembering how many birthdays I spent waiting for that kind of honesty. And how part of me still didn't believe it was real. 2 weeks later, we drove back to Silver Ridge Winery. Different setting, same venue. But everything had changed. Evan greeted us at the entrance. No tuxedo, no showmanship. Just a brother. He hugged me. Genuinely. Introduced me properly. There were no gift tables. No hidden corners. Just a table in the center of the room marked Family of the Groom, Miles Harrington. It wasn't fancy. But it meant everything. No Charles. No Margot. No Leon. Just a wedding filled with people who chose love over optics. After the ceremony, Evan gave a short speech. He stumbled a bit, nerves getting the better of him. But when he looked at me, voice cracking, he said, This table represents more than just names. It's a line I should have drawn a long time ago. I'm sorry for not being the brother I should have been. I didn't cry. But my son stood on his chair and clapped before anyone else did. That was enough. After the first dance, Sabrina leaned in and whispered, Was this the closure you needed? I looked around the room, at Evan laughing with Amelia, and Noah sharing a cupcake with another flower girl, and said, No. But it was a start. The morning after the party, I woke up at 6 a.m. sharp, like my body refused to forget what had happened the night before. Sabrina was still asleep, curled gently on her side, peaceful in a way I couldn't imagine faking. I crept downstairs, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat at the kitchen window staring at our backyard. Dew clung to the grass untouched. It reminded me of silence, how it looks innocent but carries so much weight. By 6:30 my phone buzzed. It was Eleanor Kessler, the COO of Hamilton and Rourke. The woman who had spent half a year negotiating the biggest deal of my company's life. Hey Miles, she said, her voice tense but respectful. I've had 5 missed calls from Charles Rourke this morning. He said something blew up last night. I took a slow sip of coffee before replying. Yeah. Something did. I told her everything, condensed but clear. How I was seated like an afterthought at my own brother's engagement. How Charles humiliated me in front of my wife and child. How I'd cancelled the deal. There was a long silence. Wow, she finally said. I had no idea. I believe you, I replied. You've always been professional. But I can't pretend everything's normal when the man you report to thinks I belong next to a pile of gift bags. She sighed. Look, for what it's worth, I'm deeply sorry. And I understand. But if anything changes, if you ever reconsider, just call me. Off the record, I'd rather work for someone like you. We ended the call. I leaned back in my chair and felt, not victorious. Just empty. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe, it echoes. That evening, while I was helping Noah with a cardboard solar system project, I got a text from Evan. "Can we talk? Just us?" I stared at it for a full minute. Sabrina walked over and looked at the message, then at me. "You don't owe him anything," she said, brushing my shoulder gently. "But maybe you owe yourself some peace." So I agreed. We met the next morning at a quiet little cafe in Capitol Hill. The kind with chipped mugs and scratched up wood tables. I got there first and waited. I wasn't nervous. Just numb. Evan walked in a few minutes later, looking like he hadn't slept. He was in jeans, a wrinkled flannel, no product in his hair. I barely recognized him without the polish. "Hey," he said, sitting down awkwardly. "Thanks for meeting me." I didn't respond. I just nodded. "I messed up," he started. "I know I messed up." "You did," I said, folding my hands. "I want to know why." He exhaled, staring into his untouched coffee. "Because I've always let them lead. Mom, Dad, even Charles lately. I thought that's what being part of the family meant, keeping them happy, even when it felt wrong." I stayed silent. He looked up, eyes red. "But after last night? I see it. I really see it. What it's like when you let people shrink you, bit by bit, until you're just a shape they control." I leaned back slightly. "You knew where they seated us, Evan. You walked past our table and said nothing." "I know," he said quickly. "And I hate myself for it. I was scared." "Of what?" "Of losing everything," he admitted. "Their approval. Their money. Their love." I stared at him for a long beat. Then I asked, "So why now?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a white envelope. He slid it across the table toward me. "This is a new invitation. Smaller wedding. Just the people who matter. No Charles. No Mom. No Dad." I didn't touch it. "Amelia and I talked all night. She didn't know what her father did. When she found out, she cried. We both agreed, we can't start a life surrounded by people who fake kindness and weaponize control." His voice broke. "This isn't a fix. I know that. But it's a beginning." I finally picked up the envelope. "I'll think about it," I said softly. Evan nodded like he didn't expect more. Then, just before I stood to leave, he asked quietly, "Miles, how did you stand it? All those years of them treating you like that?" I turned slowly, met his eyes. "I didn't stand it," I said. "I carried it. Until I couldn't anymore. When I walked out of that cafe, I didn't feel peace. Not yet. But I did feel a shift, like something long frozen inside me had started to melt." That night, Sabrina and I sat on the couch after putting Noah to bed. I showed her the invitation. No Charles. No parents. Just Evan and Amelia. Small ceremony. She read it quietly. Then she looked up at me. "Do you believe him?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I believe he wants to change. And for the first time in a very long time, I hope that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of our story." The invitation sat on our hallway table for a week. I walked past it every morning like it was ticking. Like it might explode with every passing hour if I didn't make a decision. When I finally opened it, the handwriting surprised me. It was Amelia's, graceful cursive inked in navy blue, with a line beneath our names that read, "No pageantry. No politics. Just family if you'll still have us." There was no RSVP card. Just a handwritten note and an address, Crescent Hollow Vineyard, about 90 miles from the city. Not the Ocean View Resort, not a Rourke property. Just a peaceful stretch of countryside with a view of the hills and enough distance from the wreckage behind us. I waited until the night before the wedding to tell Sabrina. "We're going," I said, setting the invitation on the kitchen island. "If you're still okay with it." She studied my face for a moment. "Do you want to go?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. But I think I need to. She nodded. Then we go. Noah overheard and immediately shouted. Will there be cake this time? His priorities gloriously intact. The next morning, we drove in silence for a while. Trees blurred past the windows. I kept imagining 1,000 ways this could still be a setup. I half expected Charles Rourke to leap out from behind a vineyard barrel and offer me a revised contract with a side of backhanded compliments. But when we pulled into the gravel lot at Crescent Hollow, I knew this wasn't that kind of day. There were no fancy banners. No security. No step-and-repeat photo ops. Just long wooden benches, wild flowers and mason jars, and acoustic guitar music drifting from an old speaker. And then, Evan. He stood by the entrance in a gray suit, no tie, holding a coffee in one hand and wiping sweat from his brow with the other. When he saw us, his expression cracked open. No performance. Just gratitude. He stepped forward and hugged me before I could even react. It wasn't perfect. It was slightly awkward. But it was real. Thanks for coming, he said, pulling back. You didn't have to. I looked him in the eyes. No. I did. The ceremony started 20 minutes later. Evan and Amelia stood under a simple arch wrapped in eucalyptus and white linen. There were maybe 40 guests total, and not a Rourke or Harrington elder in sight. I kept scanning the crowd, just in case. But no, they hadn't shown. And for once, their absence felt like a gift. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, a breeze stirred the leaves, and someone in the back sneezed. That was it. A perfect, awkward, human moment. After the vows, raw and honest in a way I'd never expected from my brother, we made our way to the reception table. And there it was, a placard in elegant handwriting. Miles Harrington and family, brother of the groom. It felt like more than just a label. It felt like someone had finally said out loud, "You belong here." As the sun began to set, I stepped away for a moment, needing air. That's when Amelia found me. "I'm glad you came," she said gently. "I wasn't sure you would." I nodded. "Me either." She hesitated. "I wanted to say something. About my father. About that day." "You don't have to," I said quickly. "But I want to," she insisted. "I was blind to it. I thought he was just overbearing. I didn't know how cruel he could be until I saw what he did to you. What he said. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." There was nothing performative about her apology. It wasn't the kind people give to keep the peace. It was the kind that costs something. "I appreciate it," I said. And I meant it. Later that evening, Evan stood up for his final toast. His hands trembled slightly as he raised the mic. "I want to thank someone who almost didn't come today," he said, looking directly at me. "My brother. My compass when I was lost, even when I didn't deserve it." The crowd turned toward me. I didn't shrink from it this time. "Some people say family is blood," Evan continued. "But I think family is the people who show up. The ones who choose you. Today I choose mine. And I hope they choose me back." Sabrina squeezed my hand beneath the table. Noah gave me a quiet thumbs up. And in that moment, I finally breathed again. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just fighting to prove something. I wasn't performing. I wasn't defending. I was simply being seen. And that, I realized, is worth more than any contract. A week after Evan's wedding, I got an email. Subject line: Vector Forge and Hamilton Rourke. It was from Eleanor Kessler, short and direct. "Charles has officially stepped down as chairman, citing personal reasons. I thought you should know. Also, congratulations, you made more impact than any board vote ever could." I stared at that message for a long time. Not because I felt triumphant, but because it all suddenly felt so quiet. No shouting match. No dramatic face-off. Just a man who had tried to control everyone finally realizing he'd lost his grip. The truth? I didn't care what Charles Rourke did next. I only cared that he wasn't in my rearview anymore. But the bigger surprise came 2 days later. I was in the kitchen making pancakes with Noah. He was. Quality control. Sneaking chocolate chips straight from the bag, when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find two people I hadn't seen since the engagement party. My parents. Leon and Margot Harrington stood there like ghosts trying to pass for living. My mother was holding something in her arms, a photo album. My father just looked hollowed out, like whatever pride he'd wrapped himself in had finally cracked open. I didn't say a word. Just stepped aside. Sabrina watched silently from the stairs as I led them into the living room. Noah sensed the tension and scampered upstairs, quiet for once. Margot set the album on the coffee table like it was a peace offering. "We wanted to talk," she said. Leon sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on knees. "We heard about the wedding," he said. "Evan told us you went." I nodded. "And about the contract," my mother added, more hesitant. "Charles's, well, it's all over the business pages now." I crossed my arms. "And?" Margot looked down. "We didn't come to defend what happened. We came because we realized something, too late, maybe. But still." She opened the album. Old photos. Me as a kid. Evan in diapers. A picture of us fishing with Grandpa Nolan. "You were always the quiet one," she said. "The one who didn't demand attention. So we forgot to give it." Leon cleared his throat. "I was proud of you, Miles. I just never said it. And by the time I thought about saying it, you were already so far ahead. I didn't know how to reach you." I could feel Sabrina watching, holding her breath. I looked at both of them and asked the question that had sat in me for years like a stone. "Why did you seat us next to the gift table?" Margot winced. "Because we were ashamed." "Of me?" "No," she said quickly. "Of ourselves. Because you made it without us. Because you didn't need us. And because somewhere deep down, we hated that." There it was. Not cruelty. Not malice. Just shame wrapped in parental ego. I let them speak a little more. They apologized, awkwardly, clumsily, and without the right words. But they were trying. I could see that. It didn't erase what they'd done, but it added weight to what they hadn't. When they left, I didn't promise anything. No family dinners. No forgiveness. Just a quiet. "We'll see." But as the door closed behind them, Sabrina turned to me. "You okay?" I thought for a second. "Yeah," I said. "Actually, yeah." 3 months later, Vector Forge's valuation doubled after a partnership with a European logistics giant. We never looked back at the Whitmore deal. But something even stranger happened that fall. At a small barbecue at Evan and Amelia's new home, Noah was playing tag with their dog, Sabrina was laughing with Amelia, and Evan stood next to me, 2 beers in hand. He handed me one and said, "I'm working on something." "Oh?" "A letter. For Mom and Dad. Telling them I won't be at Thanksgiving." I raised an eyebrow. "That's bold." He shrugged. "Maybe. But I want a family that actually shows up. Not one that just poses for pictures." We clinked bottles. And in that moment, under fairy lights and the smell of grilled corn, I realized something. Sometimes the sharpest betrayals carve space for something new. Something honest. Something real. And that's what this whole mess gave me. Not revenge. But clarity. I wasn't the outcast. I was the compass. And finally, they were all starting to follow.